ring of silence. Imagine this. The crowd is on fire. Thousands of fans scream, the ring shaking with every move. To us, this is more than entertainment. This is larger than life. These men and women are childhood heroes. They bled, they broke bones, they risked everything just to give us memories we'll never forget. But here's the twist no one wants to talk about. Behind the curtain, when the lights dim and the cheers fade away, there is a silence. A painful, haunting silence. Because some of these legends never got the respect they earned. Their stories were buried, their deaths quietly brushed under the carpet. And that's where the real villain steps in. Not in the ring, but outside it. Corporate silence, profit over pain. A company that built its empire on the backs of these warriors, but turned its face away when it mattered most. Tonight we're not here just to talk about moves, belts, or rivalries. We're here to pull the curtain back and shine a light on what WWE doesn't want you to remember. 10 wrestlers, gone too soon, ignored like they never existed. This isn't just a countdown. This is a story of heroes and villains, of men who gave us unforgettable nights, but were denied a final tribute. And by the time we're done, you'll never look at that roaring crowd, that shining spotlight, or that squared circle the same way again. Because behind all the glamour lies the ring of silence. Section 1. The Forgotten Warrior. He wasn't just another big guy in the ring. He was Test, Andrew Martin. A tall, powerful presence, with the kind of look that made fans sit up and pay attention. When he first walked down that ramp, people believed they were watching the next big star in wrestling. He had the size, the charisma, the storylines, the fans chanting his name. For a while it looked like nothing could stop him. But behind the applause, there was a man, a human being. Andrew fought through injuries, personal battles, and the pressure of an industry that chews up and spits out even its brightest stars. Like so many wrestlers before him, he gave his youth, his health, his very soul to entertain millions of strangers. And what did he get in return? Pain, silence, and eventually, erasure. When Andrew Martin tragically passed away at just 33 years old, the wrestling world should have mourned together. The WWE could have honored him with the tribute he deserved. A video package, a 10-bell salute, something to acknowledge the man who had sacrificed his body for their stage. But instead, nothing. The cameras rolled on, the shows went on, the silence was deafening. This is where the villain reveals itself. Not the opponents he faced in the ring, not the storylines where he played the tough guy. No, the true villain was the cold indifference of an industry that benefited from his labor, but erased his memory the moment it became inconvenient. It wasn't just about one man's death. It was about how quickly someone who gave everything could be forgotten. Think about it. A man who once stood in the spotlight, cheered by thousands, reduced to a ghost in WWE's history books. Fans remember, friends remember, but the company that should have cared stayed silent. And if this can happen to someone like Andrew Martin, a man who lived, breathed, and bled professional wrestling, then the question becomes haunting. Who else could be next? Section 2. The high flyer who never landed. Umaga. He was a storm in the ring, a force you couldn't ignore. When Umaga, real name Edward Edifatu, entered the arena, it wasn't just a wrestler walking down the ramp. It was electricity itself taking shape. His wild eyes, his warrior paint, his explosive speed for a man his size. Every movement made fans believe they were witnessing something larger than life. He wasn't just wrestling, he was flying without wings. Crowds roared when he smashed through opponents. Commentators screamed Umaga, as if they were calling a hurricane. For a brief moment, Umaga was the unstoppable storm, the high flyer who never seemed to touch the ground. And yet, beneath the painted face and the ferocity, there was a man, a father, a brother, a soul who carried the weight of both legacy and expectation. But Storm didn't last forever. In 2009, at only 36 years old, Edifatu's heart gave out. Just like that, the Storm was gone. Fans expected WWE to honor the man who had given so much, who had made the crowd believe every time he stepped into the ring. But what came instead? Silence, a fleeting mention, if any. No grand tribute, no 10-bell salute echoing through the arena. Nothing to match the energy he once brought into those same halls. And this is where the villain reappears. The villain wasn't the opponents who bled under his Samoan spike. The villain was the corporate silence that swallowed his legacy whole. A man who flew so high was left with no safety net when he finally fell. It's haunting when you think about it. The cheers, the lights, the moments of magic, all reduced to a quiet void. For the fans who loved him, the silence was more painful than the loss itself. Because silence means forgetting, and forgetting is the cruelest fate of all. Umaga's story ended too soon, but the way it was buried, that was even darker. And here's the chilling truth. Umaga's story isn't the only one buried. 3. The tag team ghost Crash Holly, Michael Lockwood. He wasn't the biggest guy in the ring. He wasn't the scariest. He didn't look like the kind of man who could lift giants on his shoulders. But Crash Holly, real name Michael Lockwood, had something far more powerful. He had heart, and he had laughter. Fans still remember him with the Hardcore Championship. Running through airports, laundromats, and fun parks, fighting anywhere and everywhere, making wrestling feel unpredictable, fun, and alive. Alongside his cousin Hardcore Holly, he turned every match into a story, every moment into a memory. For kids, he was a hero who proved you didn't need to be the tallest or strongest to be unforgettable. He was the spark in a division filled with chaos, the comic relief who still bled for his craft. But behind the laughs and the moments of joy, Michael Lockwood carried battles no one could see. Depression, personal struggles, the heavy weight of a business that often gives more pain than it takes credit for. On November 6, 2003, at just 32 years old, Crash Holly was found dead. Fans waited, hoping WWE would celebrate the man who gave them laughter, who made their childhoods brighter. But instead, silence. No grand farewell. No real tribute. Just another name fading into the shadows of history. The hero who gave laughter was left in silence. And this silence is the cruelest ghost of all, because laughter lives forever in memory. But when the machine refuses to honor it, it feels like that joy was stolen. Fans never forgot, but the industry acted as if it never happened. Crash Holly should have been remembered as the underdog king of fun. The man who proved that size didn't matter if your spirit was larger than life. Instead, he became the tag team ghost, a memory whispered by fans, but erased by the very stage he once lit up. And the haunting part, he wasn't the last. Section 4. The Silent Giant Viscera, Big Daddy V. Nelson Frazier Jr. He was impossible to ignore. At nearly 500 pounds, standing like a mountain in the middle of the ring, Nelson Frazier Jr., known to fans as Mabel, Viscera, and later Big Daddy V, was the kind of wrestler you couldn't take your eyes off. Whether he was crowned king of the ring in 1995, or crushing opponents as the menacing Viscera, his presence was larger than life. When he walked down the ramp, the ground seemed to shake. When he stood across the ring, even the toughest superstars looked small. But behind the spectacle, there was a man who loved the business, who gave everything to entertain, and who, despite his intimidating size, carried himself with humility outside the ring. Fans remember his wild costumes, his terrifying aura, and the way he made every match feel like a clash against a true giant. Yet, the cruel truth of wrestling's world is this: even giants can be forgotten. On February 18, 2014, just one day after his 43rd birthday, Nelson Frazier Jr. passed away from a heart attack. For someone who had given decades to the company through transformations, rebrands, and countless storylines, you would expect a grand tribute, a video package, a Hall of Fame push, something that said, "We remember." But what came instead was silence. A small mention quickly brushed aside. The man who once towered over the ring was suddenly treated like he had never existed. No grand farewell, no lasting spotlight. The giant's voice was silenced, and the industry barely whispered his name. For fans, it was heartbreaking, because Nelson wasn't just another big man. He was proof that size could be both terrifying and entertaining, that a giant could carry charisma. Yet in the end, his story reminds us of the harshest truth. If the company doesn't keep your memory alive, even the biggest shadows fade. The silent giant deserved to be remembered forever. Instead, he became another fallen warrior, whose echoes still haunt the fans who never forgot him, even when the industry did. And as we look back, the question remains chilling. If a giant can be forgotten, who is safe from being erased next? Section 5. The Broken Promise, Chyna Joan Marie Laura. She wasn't just a wrestler. She was a revolution. When Chyna, real name Joan Marie Laura, first stepped into WWE, she wasn't the diva they expected. She was stronger, faster, and more powerful than most of the men she stood across from. She shattered the ceiling that women in wrestling had been trapped under for decades. Chyna didn't just compete with women. She fought and beat men. She became the first woman to enter the Royal Rumble, the first woman to hold the Intercontinental Championship, and the face of a new possibility, that women could be more than they could be warriors. To fans, she was the ninth wonder of the world, a symbol of strength, courage, and breaking boundaries. But behind the glory, there was pain. The bright lights of fame dimmed when she left. Her personal struggles with addiction, her battles with depression, and her complicated relationship with the company left scars deeper than anyone knew. She asked for recognition, for a chance to be remembered for what she gave. But what she got was silence. On April 20th, 2016, Chyna was found dead in her apartment, alone. The woman who once stood as a giant in women's wrestling, the trailblazer who made today's women's division possible, left this world without the respect she deserved. We did not honor her properly. They did not celebrate her as a pioneer. Instead, they turned away whispering excuses, pointing to her mistakes, pretending her legacy wasn't essential to the very empire they built. And that was the broken promise. For every barrier she destroyed, for every little girl who looked at her and saw a hero, Chyna deserved immortality. Instead, she was cast as an outcast, erased from the history she helped write. Fans cried betrayal, because how can a company celebrate evolution, yet deny the woman who started it all? Chyna's story isn't just tragic, it's Shakespearean. The hero who gave everything, only to be abandoned by the very stage she built. A warrior in life, but in death, treated as though she never mattered. But fans haven't forgotten. To them, Chyna will always remain the ultimate tragic hero, proof that even when the world turns its back, true legends live forever in memory. Section 6. The Rebel's Last Fight, Bam Bigelow. Bam Bigelow, the guy with the flames tattooed on his head. Fans will always remember that look, a massive man, over 300 pounds, but moving in the ring like someone half his size. He wasn't just a wrestler, he was a rebel. A man who broke the rules of what someone his size was supposed to do. But here's the thing. Rebels don't get easy lives. Inside the ring, Bam fought every battle head-on. But outside the ring, his struggles were bigger, heavier, and not seen on camera. In 2007, when he passed away, there were headlines for a moment, and then silence. No long tribute, no big celebration of his career. Just nothing. Almost like he had never been there. And that's the part that hurts the most. Because Bam always fought, in the ring, against opponents. In life, against struggles. But his biggest fight was the fight to be remembered. And sadly, that's the fight he lost. So the real question is, should heroes like Bam really be forgotten? Or should we keep their names alive, so their stories never fade away? Section 7. The Masked Mystery, Parka. The man in the skeleton suit, dancing, making the crowd laugh, and then boom, turning the whole arena upside down with his charisma. He wasn't just a wrestler, he was a symbol. A mask that carried culture, pride, and entertainment for millions of fans. But here's the sad truth. When masked wrestlers pass away, too often people only remember the mask, not the man underneath it. Parka gave everything to this business, his body, his health, his energy. He was the heartbeat of shows in Mexico, and even in the US, his wild, unpredictable style made him unforgettable. When he died in 2020, the news came and went. A few mentions here and there, and then silence. No massive spotlight, no global recognition. Almost as if the world only cared about the mask, and not the human being who lived and breathed behind it. And that's the tragedy. Because under that mask was a man with a family, with dreams, with pain, A man who gave joy to thousands but left this world without the respect he truly deserved. Parka's story reminds us that wrestlers are more than their characters. They are people. People who bleed, who struggle, and who deserve to be remembered for who they weren't, not just the costume they wore. 8. The heart that stopped Cade. This is the story of Cade, a wrestler who had everything ahead of him. Trained personally by Shawn Michaels, Cade was young, gifted, and carried the kind of promise that made fans believe he was destined for greatness. But fate was cruel. In 2010, at just 29 years old, Cade's heart gave out. He was gone far too soon, taken at an age when most wrestlers are only starting to reach their prime. And here's where the real tragedy begins. The man whose heart stopped beating was met with an industry whose heart seemed to stop caring. The place he gave his blood, sweat, and years to, turned away no tribute. No celebration of his short but meaningful career. Just silence. It's a painful metaphor. Cade's real heart stopped. And then the company's heart turned cold. But he deserves more than silence. Because Cade represents every young dreamer who pushed themselves too far. Who gave their everything for the fans. And who were forgotten the moment the spotlight faded. Remember his name, Cade. He may have left this world early, but he deserves to live on in our memory. Section 9. The Tragic Innovator, Mike Awesome. This is the story of Mike Awesome, a name that once shook arenas with innovation. In the late 90s, when wrestling was changing, Mike brought something fresh, something fans had never truly seen before. His mix of raw power and high-flying agility made him stand out in ECW and WCW. He wasn't just another big man, he was an innovator. But here's the tragedy. For all the risks he took, for all the jaw-dropping moments he gave fans, the industry gave him almost nothing in return. When Mike passed away in 2007, there was barely a whisper. No grand tribute, no heartfelt remembrance, just silence. Think about that. A man who redefined what a heavyweight could do erased, like he was never there. He gave the business innovation, but got invisibility in return. Mike Awesome's story is a reminder that wrestling is built on the backs of those who dared to be different. He mattered. His style influenced countless wrestlers who came after him. But if we don't speak his name, that influence fades into the shadows. So let's remember him. Mike Awesome, the innovator who deserved to be remembered as much as he was feared in the ring. 10. The Eternal Underdog, Chris Kanyon. Who better than Kanyon? That was his catchphrase. But behind the chant, behind the smile, there was a man fighting battles most people never saw. Chris Kanyon was one of wrestling's most creative minds. He was constantly inventing new moves, constantly finding ways to entertain fans. He was the guy wrestlers went to when they needed something fresh. If wrestling had a secret architect, Kanyon was it. But here's the heartbreaking truth. While he gave his creativity to the business gave him loneliness in return. His struggles with identity, with being accepted for who he truly was, weighed heavy on him. And when he passed in 2010, the silence from the company he gave so much to was deafening. Kanyon wasn't just an underdog in the ring. He was an underdog in life. A man who deserved applause but got shadows. A man who deserved to be celebrated but was left ignored. And yet, his legacy whispers through every creative move we see today. He was brave, he was brilliant, and he was more than the silence that followed him. Chris Kanyon, the eternal underdog, the unsung hero who proved that sometimes the biggest battles are not in the ring, but inside the heart. The stories you've just heard, they are more than just wrestling tales. They are echoes of lives that burned bright, only to be dimmed too soon. 10 wrestlers, 10 souls, each carrying a dream, each carrying a fight, and each one, in the end, left standing in silence. Ding. One bell for Owen Hart. Ding one for Eddie Guerrero. Ding one for Umaga. Ding one for Test. Ding one for Chyna. Ding one for Bam Bigelow. Ding one for Parka. Ding one for Cade. Ding one for Mike Awesome. Ding and one for Chris Kanyon. 10 tolls. 10 reminders, 10 voices that should never be forgotten. Because here's the truth. Heroes never truly die unless we stop telling their stories. So let's not let them fade. remember them, speak their names, be their voice. And if you felt their stories today, if you believe their legacies deserve to live on, then join me. Hit that like button, share this with others, and subscribe to the channel so together, we can keep these memories alive. Because in the end, wrestling is not just about titles or fame. It's about the people, the fighters, the dreamers, the ones who gave everything. And as long as we remember them, they'll never be gone.